to our faculty conversation on Less is More. And with me today, I have Dr. Samuel Chun and also Dr. Yulia Nevskaya. We're going to be talking a little bit today about the following question, and that is, how does a less is more approach to teaching allow for deeper learning? And I've invited these two professors at the Olin Business School to share a little bit about how they've come to a more minimalist approach to what they kind of show and expose and discuss with students to begin with. And so who'd like to start?
I could start. The way I got here was I had several teaching disasters where the classes just didn't go very well. And back where I started my instructional career, we had senior faculty sitting in the room watching you, which is a terrifying thing, but they would give you great feedback. And one of the things that a guy named Ben Shapiro told me was, how many things are you trying to do in this class? And I said, oh, there's 7 key points. Well, if there's 7 key points, there are no key points. You should have no more than 3. And I said, 3, that's not possible. He said, no, it's possible. Just do it. That's sort of how it took some failures to really kind of understand that you can't possibly cover an agenda that's that long.
That's true. And I want to say that the minimalist aesthetic is probably kind of different to me, kind of in many aspects of my life. Before the kid, I should admit, because minimalist and kid do not mix. But yes, in terms of teaching, probably the course I'm teaching right now, and the one you kind of can comment on, is text mining. It's a technical course and it's a practical course, right? And also the model that we teach is a flipped classroom. So essentially, when I cover the material, I'm not with the students. And it's also a relatively new course. So I'm going to be very humble here. So my greatest scare was explaining the material to my students and not being there. So essentially, I didn't want to overwhelm them to start, right? And I guess that's where the roots of being minimalist kind of came here. And also, since it's an applied course, it's very technical. So essentially, whatever they learn in theory, they should come back to the labs and essentially apply it, right? So they have to come to data, run algorithms, and essentially see how it works. And if we have a lot of concepts, a lot of methods, we'll not be able to try them all. So that's the reason to be kind of minimalist in this sense.
So how do you two kind of balance that in terms of thinking about, I want my students to understand key concepts and skills and information, but I also know, like kind of what Ben Shapiro said to you, Sam, that 3 is good. I mean, we know this from like cognitive learning, right? Like chunking things out. Yeah. That's really, really crucial. But how do you get yourself to that? Like, how do you distill things that are complicated?
So I think the first thing is, there is this aspect of, I need the students to know what they need to know. There's absolutely that. But I think there's also the other aspect of, a basic instructional fear is, I'm going to run out of things to talk about. So I need to pack everything in. So I always have one more thing that I can cover just in case there's 7 extra minutes. And, I think the first step is to kind of, they say that a great instructional trick is to be comfortable with silence. It's not always on you to be the filler of space. You have to put that on the students as well. So I think getting used to this idea of, it's not about filling the 90-minute block or the 2-hour block. It's really about a teaching objective that the students have to get a certain skill. So pricing. So there are many ways to price. And my goal is to show one way of doing it. And when they walk out at minute 90, they'll have this feeling of, okay, I get a sense of how to do the quote value price unquote. And if you just think about learning, it's repetition. If I tell you something once, I don't think you're going to understand it. So I got to tell you again, and then I have to show you, and then I have to ask you to do it, and then I show you again. And when you start understanding that repetition is really important, you start to realize you don't actually have as much time as you think you have. And you don't really need to fill it. So I think it's that mindset that I think helps you get there.
Yeah, I completely second everything Sam is saying. And also, I would like actually to thank the Center for Digital Education for inspiring me in a way to be a minimalist, because essentially the guidance that you guys provide, I appreciate a lot. and being very intentional, very clear. I guess what helps, and that's the greatest advice you gave me. It's obvious, right? But when you repeat it, even to a faculty member who's been teaching for a little bit, not much, but a little bit, it still kind of sets your mind in a certain way.
Part of it's like a fundamental shift somewhat of thinking about what the role of an instructor or professor is. Is it just giving of information, or is it really, and I think we all know the answer is not just that, but it's really, I think that's one of the things that I think is also a fundamental shift in thinking about less is more. How is there also maybe less of just the professor at the helm? I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about kind of how you also engage students in this more minimalist issue, or do you feel that they have more space to then voice their concerns? Because if you're using a case method, Sam, I imagine there's a lot of discussion.
Well, in this environment, there's a lot more cold calling. I think, so going back to this whole thing about it's not for, what's the instructor's job really? And I think if you think about third grade, you've got children who have minds that are basically absorbent sponges. They don't know much, but they can take a lot in. And I think that's where teaching really happens, where I show you and you absorb it. But when you get to students that are, 19, 20, in exec ed, 45, 50 years old, that absorbency is no longer there. And really learning happens because of doing. And so if you're an instructor with older students, and I think college students are what I'd consider older students, they're on the younger end of that spectrum, but graduate students, for example, it's about doing stuff, not about being told stuff. And therefore, the whole purpose in a case study to do a cold call is to force the issue of getting them to say something to you, as opposed to vice versa. And that, if you can sustain a discussion around that, the time fills itself.
As you have kind of this less is more, and in terms of thinking maybe about how you assemble a course and some of the things that you do, Sam, I heard you talk about skills, right? Really making sure that you keep learning objectives clear and crisp in your mind. What are we trying to be able to do at the end of this class? And Yulia, I heard you say you wanted to make sure that you gave enough information that it still covered the essential framework of how to do text mining, but not to overwhelm or inundate students. I often think about like that fire hose of knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. You want to have more of a curated stream so that it's not completely overwhelming. If you're trying to give maybe just some encouraging words to people that are trying to pare down everything that they cover. And I think this coverage-based model is the thing that often gets us in trouble. Like we align things to what's in a chapter or what's in a textbook, or instead of maybe thinking, what are the things I really want students to be able to know or do at the end of this session or the end of this class? And so what would you say to folks that are trying to kind of be even more intentional about what they're including in a course? Is there any advice other than just do it, like Ben Shapiro said to you, Sam? Like, is there anything that you two have learned along the way other than just like, the direct imperative to do so?
I think it's almost always the case that when you look at the 18 bullet points that you want to cover in the class, some of those bullet points will overlap, and you're going to find it's almost like a factor analysis. You're going to find that, hey, these three things can really be covered with kind of one concept, and then you can start making more informed trade-offs in terms of what actually stays and what goes. So often the answer is just staring at you. You just have to think about it in the right way. And I think when you have 18 things on a sheet of paper that you want to cover in a 90-minute class, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just a question of how you structure and frame it in a way where it kind of distills down to 6, and then it becomes 3, and then it becomes manageable, right?
Yeah, if your question, Kelly, was about learning, for me, I think my learning just started really. So learning as an instructor, I think it's,
yeah.
And we all build new courses, and essentially we learn to teach, we learn to coach.
Right, and it's an iterative process, right? It's something that
you learn by failure.
Totally. I
Honestly.
always think about the Samuel Beckett line, next time fail better. I feel like that a lot of times we whitewash the importance of failure and how important it is to actually improvement and learning and teaching. So yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's important for students to know that, our classrooms are places where they're going to fail too, and they're going to learn from that as well. And I think we can do a lot where that's concerned too. Thank you both so much for your time. And really, this was a very interesting conversation. I really appreciate you doing this in terms of kind of sharing a little bit more about how you arrive at less is more and what you teach. Thank you both.